COVID-19 is moving quickly around the globe, and it's not just the disease that's spreading. The virus has also triggered an outbreak of xenophobia, with Asian people being attacked and blamed for the virus. Is it just fear, or is the epidemic revealing deep-seated prejudices? And societies are built on trust. How much do people trust their government, their media, and other institutions? A new survey takes a closer look, and so will we. Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. As COVID-19 has spread to over 100 countries, a wave of xenophobia and hostility against Asians also seem to have been looming around the world. The New York Post reported on March the 8th, for instance, that an Asian man was stabbed more than a dozen times while wearing a surgical mask in a Brooklyn attack and is clinging on to life. So how widespread is this wave, and what are the underlying socio and economic factors? I'm joined from Salford, UK by Dr. Paul Bagguley from the School of Sociology and Social Policy at the University of Leeds, and from New York by Fred Teng, President of the America-China Public Affairs Institute. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. So I just want to highlight some of the headlines that we're seeing around the world, which are highlighting these problems. For instance, this New York Times piece is the face of the coronavirus, a Hong Kong student shunned in Italy. And then this by the South China Post, Australians avoid Chinese restaurants amid coronavirus fear, fake news. Then this time by the Forbes, France in grips of racism epidemic as coronavirus fans anti-Asian hysteria. And also by The Guardian, Chinese in UK report shocking levels of racism after coronavirus outbreak. And these are just some of the headlines that we can find on this topic. So I want to go to Dr. Bagguley first. How widespread do you think such incidences are at this level, and how much alarmed should we be?
I think they are, in a sense, quite widespread. I mean, we've seen numerous examples in the media, and in the UK we would usually expect to see these kinds of things reported to the police, and eventually the police will produce some hard data over how many of these attacks have been reported to them. But they do seem to be quite widespread reports in the media of people of Chinese or East Asian appearance being attacked, being verbally abused in public places. And this has obviously just happened quite suddenly in response to fears around the coronavirus.
Could you say a bit more about the reasons, the obvious reasons behind why there is this sudden outburst of these incidents? Is it because people are wearing masks, which is kind of stigmatized in the Western society, or because people of fear of people from an Asian country possibly carrying the virus sitting too close to them on the subway? What are some of the more obvious reasons that you can highlight, Dr. Bagguley?
Some of the reasons are quite deep historical roots, and certainly in the UK there's a long history of racism around the kind of theme of people from other countries bringing diseases to the UK. There are numerous examples of this over previous decades, going back a century or more. And it is in the UK very unusual to see people wearing surgical masks in public places. And to suddenly see people wearing them does kind of generate a kind of level of concern among those who don't really understand why the masks are being worn. So there's, in a sense, a long-term historical reason. It's very kind of deeply embedded in kind of racism in Britain. And then there are these more immediate, proximate reasons, the unusual appearance of surgical masks in public places.
Fred, let me ask you about the situation in the United States. We've seen sporadic incidents since the earliest days of this outbreak. How is the situation now, as there are more cases emerging in the United States and people are getting frustrated or angry or confused about the kind of situation over the next 2 weeks? What are the situations that you are seeing, and what do you think are the most important reasons behind the situation?
First, I think that xenophobia and racism is a virus by itself. It's always there, it's brewing. And with the current nationalism going all over the world, and this thing brings it up. I do not think that it really has to do with just the surgical mask. Even Asians or Chinese do not wear the mask. They are being attacked as well. And there's a gentleman in the subway, somebody taking a Lysol and spraying him because because he's just being Asian. In fact, in New York, we are convening a meeting on this Thursday with the police, with the communities, with outside communities, looking at these hate crimes as well as racial assaults on the community and how to document it as well.
What do you think are some of the deeper reasons? Because I have also talked to my colleagues in the UK, for instance, and some of the opinions that they're sharing, they're finding is that there are deep-rooted frustrations anyway, or problems within the society anyway, and it's just coming out triggered by the outbreak of an epidemic. Maybe people have already been frustrated with, for instance, the unemployment situation or lack of upward mobility or the competition as a result of immigrants coming to their countries, so on and so forth. So Dr. Bagguley, do you see these factors kind of playing underlying role, and it's just been triggered by the recent virus?
Yeah, I think that's right. In the UK, living standards have basically not improved over the last 10 years since the financial crash of 2008. It's only really just in the past year that people have been able to kind of feel or experience any kind of improved economic circumstances. And I think it may seem entirely unrelated, but the vote in the UK to leave the European Union also unleashed this kind of public racism and xenophobia, and that seems to have been kind of remained at a fairly kind of high level since then. So we now have this kind of public culture in Britain where, you know, certain people, certain obviously racist people, feel the confidence of being racist towards people in public places, even when they are challenged by other people. So I think there are those kind of two factors in play there. One to do with the kind of economic stagnation, and the other to do with the political situation of nationalism and populism that's developed.
Fred, what's the situation in the United States? As some of including you here, have pointed out, racism has always been there in the United States, in Europe, and given the kind of tension, let's say, that's going on between bilateral relations between the two governments, is there any possibility that the virus could also have been riding on the wave of diplomatic tensions and the misunderstanding or lack of understanding between the two countries as a result of long-term hostility or lack of communication between the two sides?
I think especially for the last 3 years, since the Trump administration's been in power, the U.S.-China relations has not been good. What they have done is they're shifting a lot of blame on the China side instead of the lack of leadership in the United States, or the lack of visions and lack of building up for the people. Certainly this time it will be conveniently again shifting the blame onto China again. And we have seen that in the news media, asking for apologies, and all kind of crazy things is going on over here. But the sad thing is that the leaders in the United States is overlooking the severity of this virus, and as a result, more Americans going to get infected and they will be hurt.
What will be the impact of such behavior, of such sentiments, on the much-needed solidarity that is much needed to fight this virus. I mean, the head of the World Health Organization, for instance, keeps calling for solidarity. So, Dr. Bagguley, what do you think could be the impact on the global effort to fight this virus if this kind of xenophobic feelings are not countered on?
Yeah, I think the important thing with solidarity is that it requires trust. Trust of governments, trust towards strangers, and these kind of xenophobic attacks are an example of a lack of trust, both in governments and a lack of trust towards strangers as well. So I think there is a real sense in which we have to try and control these xenophobic attacks, to kind of explain to people through social media, through governments and through the mass media, really kind of what is happening and how the virus is spreading. And it's not particular races or ethnic groups or people from particular countries that are the problem.
You used the word control. I know that's hated in many parts of the world, but in this sense, I guess we have to find a way to deal with it. Do you have any suggestion? I mean, I have to highlight as well, while we're talking about these attacks, there are also people who stand up and speak up for the Asian community, including commoners, including political leaders. That has to be recognized. But in general, how do you think people, this kind of sentiment can be dealt with? Dr. Bagguley, once again.
I think an important thing is if ordinary people, when they see these examples of public racism, they have to kind of speak out on the spot and challenge them on the spot. And in particular, one thing we've noticed in this country, in the UK, is that people have been videoing these events on their mobile phones, and then they've being very kind of useful for the police in terms of prosecuting people, because these events are criminal offences in the UK. So if the police have good evidence, it may be a video from a mobile phone, then they can actively and successfully prosecute people for these kind of racist attacks. And that has happened in the past, and that is actually, I think, one effective control. Is that if people feel they are being videoed, then they will obviously stop abusing and attacking people.
Yeah, basically protect yourselves. Fred, what do you think the Asian communities or the Chinese people which have been subject to this kind of attacks, what can they do better, both in the immediate sense when they're facing such kind of threat, but also on a longer term sense?
I think, first of all, to the victims who have to face with such attack, they have to report to the police. We're working on something to educate them to how to reporting to the police, because this needs to be documented. If it's not documented, then we cannot show there is such a severity. Secondly is other minor degree of racial assault, people calling you names or just pushing you. It's something that does not even warrant a police arrest. But we need to document that, because if it's one case, it's one thing. But if it's 1,000 cases in a week, then it is a severity that we need the law enforcement to be in charge. But most of all, we also need other community, which they've been very supportive. The Jewish community, the African American community, the Hispanic community, they all have been coming and show great support to our community, because it's very obvious this is racism. And in any form, if you look at it, you know it's racism.
Indeed, I saw this video by a Belgian director where 2 women acted as hecklers to accuse 3 Asian passengers of posing a public threat due to, the coronavirus outbreak. And it turned out some of the bystanders, they actually reacted and stood up and spoke for the Chinese people. And when people asked her why she, decided to speak up, she said today it could be them, tomorrow it could be us or someone else. So indeed, viruses pass, racism could stay and backfire. I hope this wave of racism, xenophobia will not continue to develop. Many thanks to Dr. Bagguley from the UK and Fred Teng from the United States.